Hey there, friends and fuckers, and welcome to another Back to Basics episode where we're going to be discussing, defining, and how toing the phrase doing the inner work. What does that mean? How should we think about it? And how can we do it alongside something such as a trauma recovery podcast like this one? Let's jump in and talk about this. So, I recently realized that the series I've been putting out as of late really requires someone to understand how to do inner work after they hear the material, or else it's not really going to help them with anything. So, by year 5 of Traumatized Motherfuckers, the issue is that we're not going back and talking about doing the inner work over and over again in every show the way that it used to be more of a focus of things. Now, that's because I assume that if you start at the beginning of the show, you know how to do a lot of this work by now. But the reality is sometimes I'm providing a lot of kind of depressing or triggering information and leaving everyone to y'all's own devices, which might cause a crashing and burning scenario if you're not familiar with doing inner work. So, the problem around here has been information is not the same as inner work. Often, the information that's provided in a research based podcast like this can be pretty difficult to swallow. So, it feels like doing work. But truly, this podcast used to describe personal experiences of recovery a lot more. And at that point, it worked as a cheat sheet for listeners' own work to hear about kind of what I was going through. Now that it's a lot more educational and impersonal, and I simply prompt you to do the work, it might be creating some dangerous situations because you might not know how to. So let's try to iron this out. Just for everyone's information, my workflow around here goes like this. There's years of inner work that have been conducted as a daily job, which lead to education, epiphany, and behavioral change in these kind of flowing cyclical manners. Then I pick something out of that flow and spend many months analyzing it for some greater meaning, from which I pull out the episode research and provide some basic educational message that's generalized for the masses. So, you, the listener, hear that last part, the episode, but you do not see the years of inner work, education, epiphany, behavioral change, and months of analysis that lead up to the show. Which means the episode is just the tip of the fucking iceberg. Which means what everyone is really here for is the education, epiphany, behavioral change, and years of inner work as a daily job part. But instead, you hear the episode, which means that you're kind of tasked with flipping and reversing my workflow, starting with the episode and translating it into your own inner work, education, epiphany, and behavioral change. So, here are some problems that kill me slowly, week after week. I don't know that anyone is doing that. I cannot make anyone apply the information or think about the episode outside of listening to it. I can't tell each individual how the educational information pertains to them specifically. I cannot guarantee anyone else really knows what inner work is in the same way that I have been doing it. And I just can't express strongly enough. In recovery, if you are not triggered or upset, well, you're probably missing out on something. Discomfort is not something to avoid, and ease is not something to rely on to make change. And meanwhile, here at Traumatized Motherfuckers Enterprises, I'm thrilled to tell you we do believe therapy is great. We love therapists and therapy. And also, we believe that 30 to 60 minutes of work per week is going to produce some pretty slow and spotty results in your recovery process. We also believe therapists only know what we tell them, which is limited by shame, and what they understand about life, which is limited by their personal experience. So we believe that we heal ourselves best, which is why we need to know how to do that work. So here's this point from a recent episode. Dirty words. What would it actually take to love yourself? We were discussing self-work, and we suggested pretend to mediate event contextualization and realistic assessment and self-forgiveness and care for another person who's stuck in a self-hating state. And it will feed back to therapize your own brain. And we pointed out, yes, we're talking about tapping into the self with a capital S to mediate between your self-hating parts. And we provided you this graphic. I do recommend checking it out if you are not watching the video. But it shows the capital S self above the small s self and many parts below that in a branching sort of fashion. So the capital S self speaks to the parts of one's personality and mediates between them. Then these parts reinform the small s self about who they really are. The big S self is like your higher or ascended spiritual self. The parts of the personality are the many versions of a person across time, which get compartmentalized in a traumatized brain much of the time. And the small s self is your cumulative earthly identity. So there is a workflow for actually changing who you yourself are by starting at the top, getting in and working in the minute details of your memories, and then feeding that information into your cumulative idea of who you are. And we have to say, absolutely, a therapist can help with this, especially an IFS, internal family systems trained practitioner. And also, if you can think critically, a therapist really is not required for this work a great deal of the time, because no one knows your self with a capital S, yourself with a small s, or your damn parts better than you, maybe not do, but better than you can. So we believe that if you are not engaging with therapeutic material outside of the therapy office, you're missing 99% of your healing opportunity. If you're educating yourself, but you're not applying the information all the way through your damn parts, it's pretty useless. If you hit a pain point and you run, that pain will remain. So if your education gets difficult and you turn away from it, nothing changes. And it's mandatory to do inner work throughout your real daily life, because your real daily life is where the traumas took place. So it's necessary to target them to make significant and lasting change. So what is the work that must be done? Inner work we're defining as explicitly identifying, comparing, compromising between, and rectifying perspectives within you yourself. So you have this old default or traumatic perspective, the one that you were given, the one that was modeled for you, and in many ways forced upon you at a young age. You need to explicitly understand what that perspective is, because largely it has been implicit and not something that you've consciously worked with in your life. Then there's your current, authentic adult perspective, the one that you've genuinely earned through your escapades on Earth, the one that wraps in your personal values and beliefs. That needs to be made explicitly known to you yourself. And then you compare the old default traumatic perspective with the current, wiser, authentic, educated adult perspective. You do your compare, contrast, and then you cultivate, carefully choosing which aspects you truly believe in, the most accurate and authentic perspective available. That is doing the work. So the workflow moves from the subconscious to the conscious. You have subconscious memories, emotions, thoughts, and beliefs. They are made conscious, meaning they're explicitly identified and defined with words. Then they have to be checked for logical holes and compared against authentic knowledge and personal values. Then you edit that perspective for accuracy and authenticity and accept it. And that is the inner workflow. But really, it's this direction. Everything is flipped. Instead of reading from the top down, we're reading here from the bottom up, because the real inner workflow requires you to go into yourself, starting in the guts. And you might notice I did a little flip in reverse here on this graphic with some of the words as well. So your memories and emotions are way down at the bottom in the very base of your guts, the foundation of your core. And your emotions and memories are kind of interchangeable. Some people might have memories come up first that lead to emotions. Some people might have emotions first that lead to memories. Then they tend to lead to your subconscious thoughts. And from there, you can find your subconscious beliefs. You bring it up higher, make it conscious, bring it up higher still into your prefrontal cortex, where you're checking for logical holes and comparing against your authentic knowledge, editing that perspective for accuracy, and then accepting it throughout all of you. So, trauma inner work is really pulling memories up from the depths. We call that trauma archeology. Then revisiting your initial judgments and having your half-finished emotions. In other words, picking up where your traumatic processing left off. Then understanding the prior meaning of the memory in your life. That's naming the fucked up core belief that the memory has led to. We finally get to comparing that against the current understanding of life, which is leveraging your adult wisdom and values. And finally, we get to the last step, number 5, developing new beliefs, which we could say is reparenting. In other words, again, we're making the unconscious conscious and ironing out the bugs with critical thinking via the prefrontal cortex, which is simply applying your fancy human intelligence to what has been animalistically programmed, your reactions, your survival responses. Inner work is taking things from the depth of you, from your inner core, a space that we rarely get to go to, pulling it out, taking a look at it, and then making decisions about whether to keep it or alter it. So, how do we do it? With explicit instructions from this bitch instead of all of these fancy graphics. Here's how to inner work with traumatized motherfuckers. Number 1, you hear something that sparks a reaction, positive or negative. You need to, step 2, pause the show and feel that emotion. Try not to take any action or distract yourself or enter a state of avoidance, such as screaming, "Fuck this asshole," and deleting the podcast from your phone, thus feeling like you escaped from the threat, when really the threat is within your own skull. Step 3, as you feel, you let your thoughts stream. 4, go about your day and your life. paying attention to your subconscious images, voices, and sensations. Step 5, place your emotional reactions within a memory, which might take a while. It might require life to jog your memory for you, but I have found that this will happen if you have information that you've put in your head as something of interest to take a look at. Your head will try to solve that mystery as you go through your life, and you will have epiphany moments left and right, up and down, if you pause and pay attention to them. Step 6 is engaging with that memory once you've got it in your grasp. Explore it and feel the feelings that come with it. 7, revisit your judgments from the aftermath of that trauma or event. What were you thinking? How did you maybe turn it around on yourself? What did you come to decide about this event? And what narrative did you develop? 8, consider how those aftermath judgments, thoughts, decisions, and other big cognitive takeaways seem to now apply to your modern day life. How did you respond and adapt to that trauma? And how are you still carrying it with you behaviorally and in your thoughts and feelings? In other words, make connections between the original trauma judgments, emotional reactions, and adaptations, and your present day complaints, all the things you wonder about yourself, and your generally unfulfilled, unhappy lifestyle, if that's what you're working with. Then, step 9, from this information, you identify your fucked up core beliefs that were derived from the original attempts at processing that trauma. You do this based on those feelings, thoughts, and judgments that you now realize are apparently still framing your way of living to this day. Step 10, compare that implicit, now explicit, fucked up core belief to your more adult, authentic, educated core belief, the thing you really, truly, consciously believe in. And you examine the details between the fucked up core belief and the authentic adult core belief that do not align with each other. Then, step 11, you rid your brain of the details that do not fit within your real perspective by rewriting the belief via critical thought, accurate language usage, and emotional experiencing. And 12, you talk to yourself about this change in programming that you're making until it feels settled in your system. There's a sense of relief. There's not a bunch of tension or discomfort. And that sounded like a lot, but congratulations, because if you do this, you just resolved a traumatic memory, identified its limitations on your life, named your actual beliefs and experiential knowledge, re-informed yourself accurately about life and yourself, and rewrote a traumatic belief. And then sewed it through your entire psyche, so you're paving the way for long-term behavioral change to be possible without a bunch of resistance or self-sabotage. Because of this part, where your capital S self is speaking to your many parts, mediating between them, which then puts your system at ease. So you are not internally fighting against yourself with one part of your psyche believing the inner work that you're doing and another part of your psyche fighting against it. This allows you to reinform the small s self, who then can re-enter the world with new beliefs and behaviors, leading to what we're all aiming for, a new life based on what you actually deserve and want and would feel fulfilled from. But all of this does mean You have to do some follow-up work and investigate yourself when a negative reaction emerges, especially in response to media. You cannot just listen along to the words that sound the nicest if you do want to make observable, situation improving changes. So it's important to note that consumption of media comes along with the idea that you are easily swallowing, accepting, and digesting that information, moving on without further consideration. And does that sound like doing trauma work? No. Trauma work is difficult, as we're always discussing, and so are at least my trauma recovery episodes. So, consumption is not really the goal. Don't consume only media that makes you feel good or agrees with your personal beliefs or helps you feel like life has been one long, never ending string of victimhood, and call it doing inner work. It's not. Most likely, media like that will provide short-term validation and a small dopamine boost, but then you'll forget everything that was said to you and nothing will come of it. So, as far as inner work versus consumption of media, I do not recommend clickbaity lists, quick fixes like here's the one thing you need to do, universal advice such as everyone should go no contact, little 5-minute long videos on healing trauma on TikTok, or really any kind of kid gloved mental health information. There's a stage of recovery where all of that is nice and it's interesting for the brain to read through, but you really won't get much from it. Instead, I suggest that for your inner work, you investigate media that makes you feel complex emotions like confusion, bafflement, trepidation, intrigue, curiosity, ambivalence, and straight up upset. Complex emotions will point you towards complex memories with complex thought systems behind them because they were developed, quote, in the aftermath, aka your traumas and your resulting core beliefs can be spotted if you look for complexities. Long story short, what I'm saying is listening to episodes of this show and any other cannot and will not do the inner work for you. But if you're actively listening, they can help hugely with the first two steps of inner work. That's pulling memories up from the depths, your trauma archeology, and revisiting your initial judgments and feeling your half-finished emotions. That's picking up where your trauma processing left off. And those things will happen listening to a program such as this due to the emotional triggering that it often can provide, which leads to pulling that memory up from the depths. So again, recall this graphic that I showed where memory and emotion are deeply related down at the core of your being. If you are feeling an uncomfortable feeling, there's a good chance that there's a memory there waiting for you to discover it. So take what you hear. Notice what riles your system up the most. Work with that material after class, after the podcast or video, investigating why it upsets you. This will point you towards your fucked up core beliefs. You take your fucked up core beliefs to therapy and or critically challenge them yourself outside of the office, which we suggest you do. Here are some critical thought questions for situational traumas. What really happened? What was your part in the event? What does it mean? Are you sure? How do you know? What evidence do you have? Is it always true? How would an outsider see this? Would they have all pertinent information? What information did you have back then? What information did you lack then? What do you know better now? Would you expect different from someone else? Would you respond differently to them? Would you blame them for the outcome? And critical thought questions for interpersonally abusive traumas. What beliefs were you operating on back then? Where did they come from? Who modeled or enforced your beliefs? Who modeled or enforced your post-traumatic judgments? Were they based on prior abuse? Who benefited from the situation? What is their behavioral track record? Are they someone to believe, trust, or base decisions on? Where do your beliefs differ? Are they based on different experiences that you've had with this person? Is their experience of life more real than yours is? Do they know more or know better than you do? Really? Looking at their life? Do they know you or your life better than you do? Absolutely not. Do you believe them more than you believe your own experience? And if so, that's a big point to explore. Check out these questions. They'll be waiting for you so you can do your own inner work. And that takes you through the next two steps of it: understanding the prior meaning of the memory and comparing it against your current understanding of life, bringing you to the reparenting stage, which is simply asking, what did you need an adult to show you back then, based on wisdom that they had gained from experience, that would have settled your fears and equipped your brain with a more realistic and self-positive outlook on life? And can you provide that care to yourself now? That is developing new beliefs and new behaviors through the reparenting process. So, simply identifying your child perspective, identifying your current day, scientifically derived, accurate, and self-beneficial adult perspective, and then applying the adult perspective to the child perspective to correct old inaccuracies while also showing care. Because you want to do this work with a self-compassionate lens. Identify your child perspective and honor its emotions. Identify your current day perspective and your modern day lingering pains from your voids in experience, such as areas where you didn't receive love or attention or care. And apply the adult perspective to the child perspective while providing the previously lacking demonstrations of care. So, as you listen to this series, Dirty Words, What Would It Actually Take to Love Yourself? Please don't forget to do the inner work along with the show. That's all of these steps right here, starting with possibly being emotionally triggered by the very show that I'm suggesting you listen to. Investigate what really sticks with you, especially in the negative ways, and apply your original thoughts to the episode. Don't turn off the podcast and move on with your life, never thinking about what you hear again. And that goes for all media, not just this here show. Do not consume. You must consider, including considering why you disagree or why you are triggered by something. Apply your thought to it afterwards. Look for answers within yourself and dig down deep to find those answers from your own trauma archeology. Plus, be sure to ask questions if you get stuck along the way, and maybe a fucker, such as yours truly, can help you find the answers that you're not immediately finding within you doing your inner work. And I hope this has answered what is doing the inner work and showed you some things that might originally upset you, which can be used to find subconscious beliefs, which could use revision with more accurate, authentic adult perspectives. And I'm honored to be the source of upset if you have been looking for one to jumpstart all of this work. With that, fuckers, cheers. Good luck out there. Good luck in there with all of your archaeology and reprocessing. And if you need any help, don't forget that you have sources available. Shout at me on the Patreon, shout at the community, and see what answers you can get to assist you with your own inner work. Until we speak again next time, get busy. Don't be afraid of what feels uncomfortable. And I'll talk to you real soon. Bye, fuckers.